On Talk of the Nation tonight, we are talking mental health. Yesterday was World Mental Health Day, an occasion to pay more attention to some of the issues that are causing people to suffer internally, occasionally bursting out in anger and frustration. Now, with the economy suffering a downturn, several have been forced to lash out against their loved ones or those around them for no apparent reason other than frustration. Now, to appreciate some of the problems that cause these situations, we do have Kizito Wamala, a clinical psychologist, who is also going to be sharing with us tips on how we can keep our mental health in check. Good evening to you, Mr. Kizito, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right. Before we get into the gist of our discussion tonight, I would like us to make it clear for purposes of the benefit of the viewer. The words that are mostly interchangeably used are mental health and mental illness. Yeah. Could we start with the clarification of that?
Thank you so much. Yeah, you are very right. These two terms are so many times interchangeably used. However, for matters of clarification, mental health is a state of being in which we are cognitively, that's the way I think, emotionally, the way I feel, somatically, physically, the way my physical being is, and behaviorally, the way I act, that is functional enough, that enables me to navigate through the challenges of life, through the existential challenges. Mental health does not mean that life excludes problems, but it means that I am able to adaptively navigate through these problems. On the other hand, mental illness is a state that as well includes the four aspects, cognitive functioning, the way we think, emotional functioning, the way we feel, the feelings, and the somatic experience, the way our physical being is, and as well behaviorally, the way we act. That, number one, goes against one's culture. That number two causes pain to one or the others.
We're explaining mental illness?
Yes, mental illness. And that three is long-lasting, whereby the long-lasting aspect is generally very subjective. However, we have diagnostic tools. For example, a book called the Diagnostic Manual, DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, 5th edition, which outlines the time frame for every one of these mental illnesses.
Okay. As somebody that directly deals with people that have mental health or mental health issues, what would you say is the state of mental health amongst Ugandans in the country?
I think it's a very difficult question, but, because the Minister of Health, Mental Health Department, is right now still struggling with a prevalence study to really establish the actual or the accurate
statistics.
Statistics. However, we know from different sources, from the media, from the last census, that the prevalence of mental illness or mental health conditions that are not satisfying enough, that are not adaptive enough, that are not enabling people to navigate through life challenges are very high. I think at one point we had a 48%. Maybe it is, maybe not. But if you are living in a home or you are living in a community and you are able to witness the so much that goes on that relates to how well people are functioning psychologically, mentally, I think we can rightly conclude that the prevalence is very high.
It's very high.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the, again, as somebody that deals with people in this sector, what are some of the most common mental health challenges that people present when they come to you?
Yeah, when you say challenges, and I would like to keep the discussion around the challenges.
Yes.
Because it's very possible to be talking about diagnoses.
Okay.
The diagnoses are so many.
Okay.
And I want to say they are, according to the DSM-5, the diagnostic tool that I've just spoken about.
If you're to break down some of them.
Yeah. So out of the 297 that exist that we know, plus those that are not known, the most common in Uganda are mood disorders, including depression, including, you know, the other switch that is called, you know, the manic switch, which makes it a bipolar affective disorder. Not so common, but depression, anxiety, whereby depression is very much characterized by sadness, that's very chronic, and sometimes can be so deep. You know, worthlessness, you know, meaninglessness, loss of, you know, pleasure in pleasurable things. Whereas, you know, the anxiety cluster of disorders is very much characterized by, you know, uncertainties, worries about things, you know, catastrophizing the future, thinking that the worst is going to happen. And so keeping in a state of heightened kind of emotional state.
And you did highlight something to do with mood swings, and that will bring me to the next question. The conditions or the challenges that you have mentioned, do they sometimes cause people to lash out? Or do they sometimes cause people to, you know, trigger anger and there is a sort of an outburst? People don't even realize that someone doesn't realize the actions they are doing. They only realize it later. Because I want to give an example. This week, we saw a police officer lashing out at a shop attendant in Ntinda, you know, because she simply asked for change. And before we knew it, he was throwing slaps at her. And also, and many were surprised about at this situation. But also about a week ago, some police officers were seen, you know, we're in a political season, and people subscribe to different political parties. But there's some police officers that were seen tearing down posters of the NUP candidate. And some of them were labeled to be, you know, dealing with some kind of mental challenge. So could this be the triggers of outbursts?
Well, as I defined in a very, very simple way, a mental disorder that includes, you know, how we present emotionally, how we function emotionally, how we present cognitively, how we, you know, function cognitively, and the other two domains of functioning. Yeah, seeing somebody who lashes out in aggression to someone else can be a sign of a mental problem. However, it's very important for all of us to understand that, you know, for example, the World Health Organization report of 2019 can sound like so many years ago, but in the health field, that's very recent. 2019 is very, very recent. So indicated that up to 70% of the world population, somewhere in their lifetime, may experience an event that is close or equal to a traumatic event. Meaning that, you know, where we live, we are a traumatized world population. And I don't want, you know, to limit that to Africa alone or to Uganda alone, but to the global population. And it is very, very well known scientifically that somebody who has been traumatized in so many ways experience different changes in the way they function, in the way they look at themselves, in the way they evaluate their situations, in the way, you know, they evaluate relationships with other people. And because of that, they feel like the world is unfair and is a threat to them. By nature, every human being has a capacity to aggress you know, violence on another once they feel threatened.
So then how can we deal with these traumatic experiences, you know, to avoid bursting out or lashing out in anger? How then do we keep our mental health in check?
I want to begin with the family, with the home, where we live, where we raise our children, because most of these violences are experienced when we are still very, very young. Parents perpetrating violence against children, parents perpetrating violence against each other in the seeing of the children. So this violence becomes normalized. Children learn that it's a normal way of sorting out, of solving issues.
Absolutely.
And therefore slapping somebody is a way to tell them, I am powerful and please listen to me. And this is also characterized by there's so much kind of impunity that goes around, that somebody does that and receives no sanction, and the viewers probably are going to do the same.
Okay.
So you find so many cycles of this type of violence that is not tamed.
Okay. And so now there is this category of people that would want, because I mean we've always talked about people sharing their issue because a problem shared is a problem partly solved. And so there is a person that is not free to speak out their problem because of reasons, maybe fear of judgment. What advice can you give to a person like that?
Yeah, I am thinking that, you know, each one's life is theirs, number one. Then it is ours all together, say as a family. Then it's ours all together as a community and as a nation. Yeah, different personalities respond differently to needs. And I'm thinking that, you know, number one step, that we pick the courage. I notice that I'm not well. You know, there is the stigmatization, very common stigmatization of mental illness and mental health conditions that are not very healthy in our communities. But for me to notice that I have malaria and I'm able to go to hospital should be the same as for me to notice I'm not mentally well and I go to hospital.
And is there a chance of healing?
I am very convinced through my 18 years of practice that every mental illness, once detected early enough and attended to appropriately, heals.
Okay.
That's why we are there. That's why there are hospitals like Butabika and all the others across the nation and across the world.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kizito Wamala, clinical psychologist, for making time to share with us and also to help us keep our mental health in check. And as you heard him in his deliberations, it is a concerted effort, but also it goes back to the parents at home. When you are trying to correct your children, find a better way, find, you know, some ways of putting them in line and without causing trauma, without causing harm. That way we shall have a trauma-free society. And with that conversation, we stop for a break. When we return, we'll be hearing from the